I'd like to welcome the Minister to the House, and if members will take their seats for this important debate on the motion regarding public judicial inquiry into the murder of Pat Finucane. And I will call on Senator Neil O'Donnell to move the motion. You have 12 minutes.
I so move, and I want to begin by thanking the Minister and welcoming him here for tonight's debate. And I would also like to thank Pat Finucane's family for giving me and us the opportunity to raise Pat's case here in the Seanad. I'm particularly want to welcome John Finucane, Pat's son, who's here with us for tonight's debate ahead of a similar motion that will be debated at the Good Friday Agreement Committee tomorrow, of which John is a member as an MP for North Belfast. Cahirlock, I didn't know Pat. I was just 4 years old when he was murdered. But the community of the Short Strand, where I grew up and represented in Belfast City Council before being elected to the Seanad, knew Pat well. And he was known well in communities right across the north for exactly the same reasons as he was known in my home place. They knew him as a person to go to protect them, their champion defending their human and civil rights. They knew him as an intellectual powerhouse with a consummate legal brain honed to perfection in one of Ireland's foremost institutions of learning, Trinity College, just around the corner from here. They watched him as he used his keen legal mind to protect people in the various courtrooms in the north on the receiving end of a justice system twisted beyond recognition from the jurisprudence that Pat studied as a young law student at Trinity. They knew that when Pat Finucane entered a courtroom, injustice, however it was presented, doctored or emasculated, shrivelled in the face of his rigorous interrogation and dismantling of it. And it was Pat Finucane's legal mind that those who killed him feared, effused as it was with a human rights ethos. His legal files characteristically and firmly under his arm as he rushed from one court building to another to defend a person in need. His advocacy for those who did not have the means to protect themselves from an overwhelming and omnipotent and murderous state. Pat Finucane was murdered because he knew the potency of the law, the potency of the truth, the potency of justice. And those who killed him, from the loyalists who pulled the trigger that fateful Sunday afternoon to their masters in Downing Street, where the legal paper trail has taken the civilised world of lawyers and others, made a fundamental mistake. They underestimated Pat Finucane's legacy, human and legal. Their assassination plan did not account for the determination of Geraldine, his wife, and their children Michael, Catherine and John. It didn't take into account the legal minds of Michael and John, honed like their father's mind to navigate a carefully constructed maze of deceit and delay manufactured by those covering up the truth and denying the family justice, the British government. It did not take into account the determination of Pat's faithful and loyal friend, colleague and legal partner, Peter Madden. In preparing for tonight's debate, I've been speaking with Pat's son, John. John followed his father, as did his brother Michael, into the legal profession, and John is also the Sinn Féin MP for North Belfast. I appreciate we have political business here tonight, Minister, but I would also like us, as members, to take a moment and think of Pat's family, Geraldine, his wife, and their 3 children, Michael, Catherine and John, as well as Pat and Geraldine's grandchildren, alongside Pat's siblings and extended family circle, and the difficult life they have had since that awful day, the 12th of February 1989, when Pat was murdered at the family dinner table. Geraldine was also injured in the attack while their 3 children looked on. The 12th of February 1989 was a normal Sunday, just like any Sunday in a normal family home. The family were sharing it together. And as so often happens with busy parents, Sundays is that time for the parents and children to share a day together. And the highlight of that day for the Finucane clan was the Sunday dinner, the family sitting together and eating together, a time to catch up, a relaxed time to enjoy each other's company. But as we know, outside the family home, beyond the family's loving dinner table, sinister forces were planning to invade this tranquil and normal scene and obliterate it in a fusillade of deadly gunfire. The 2 loyalist armed assassins smashed into the Finucane home using a sledgehammer to break down the front door. In front of Pat's 3 children and Geraldine, seated around the dinner table, the gunmen shot Pat 14 times as he lay on the ground, mortally wounded. In a matter of seconds, the gunmen escaped, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. That, Minister, as you know and have heard many times since given your many engagements in the north, that is the stark reality of what collusion means to those on the receiving end of it, those like the Finucane family and so many, many others. Ken Barrett, convicted of murder, was a police agent. William Stobie, a UDA quartermaster and police agent, subsequently himself murdered, having backed calls for an inquiry into Pat Finucane's killing. Brian Nelson, a British military intelligence agent who was in charge of the UDA's intelligence and provided the killers that afternoon with the intelligence on Pat Finucane. Brian Nelson was ran as an agent by the Force Research Unit. These and others are links in a chain. There is absolutely no doubting that there was collusion in the murder of Pat Finucane. But as Geraldine herself has said, the purpose of an inquiry isn't to find out who pulled the trigger. Rather, it's to find out who was pulling the strings. Those who set in motion the events that resulted in Pat Finucane, a human rights lawyer, an officer of the court, being shot 14 times in front of his wife and children. And as we debate tonight's proposal, I would also like us to bear in mind the many thousands of relatives from all backgrounds, north and south, who carry a similar burden of grief to that carried by the Finucane family as a result of the conflict and the loss of a loved one. I would also like to thank my colleagues here right across the Seanad from all political groups and none who are supporting tonight's motion. I am aware that the Dáil voted in 2002 on a similar motion in support of the family's campaign for truth and justice. And I know that the Finucane clan drew great strength from that support and the support of successive Irish governments over the years for their campaign. But at this point in time, some 18 years on from the Dáil's motion, the family thought it appropriate to ask the Seanad, through this cross-party supported motion, to once again demonstrate that support through this chamber from all political parties and independents. You've heard me say, Minister and colleagues, many times in this House on a whole range of issues that the Oireachtas is at its very best, its finest, when it is united and speaking with one voice. And it is particularly important to Geraldine and her family that the Seanad is united in its support here tonight. And it is equally important for relatives of all those who lost their lives in the conflict, irrespective of their background, that the Seanad is united in its support for truth and justice for the Finucane family. In supporting tonight's motion, the Seanad is sending a crucial and powerful message to all grieving relatives right across our society, right across Ireland, and the organisations that support them north and south. This is your home. Here you will find the support that you need to help you and your family in pursuit of truth and justice. I would especially like to pay tribute to Geraldine, Pat's wife, for her composure, dignity and grace in the face of such a loss, and the calm and resolute, determined manner in which she has campaigned for truth and justice for Pat and for her family for over 30 years. Geraldine isn't just an inspirational figure for her children and grandchildren. She is also an inspirational figure for the many relatives and organisations who are campaigning for truth for a loved one lost in the conflict. I will refrain from naming all the organisations in case I would unintentionally but inevitably leave one out. These groups provide a first-class service which meet the psychological needs of hurt and grieving relatives in many ways, which support the relatives in their pursuit of truth. The organisations are an indispensable network of people motivated by the highest ideals in assisting the most vulnerable and hurt communities affected by the conflict. In their work, they help to rebuild lives that have been shattered, give people a sense of purpose again, lift them out of the morass of grief, which often paralyses them and places them on a purposeful and meaningful path in their lives once more. And a very important part of rebuilding lives shattered is the opportunity that the pursuit of truth and justice gives to relatives. And these organisations bring the necessary skills to those relatives in their truth campaigns. The Finucane family have said many times over the years that their campaign for truth and justice for Pat is a campaign for all those relatives who lost loved ones and who are demanding truth and justice. Pat Finucane was one of the most high-profile human rights lawyers in Ireland. His killing was national and international news. And for the last 31 years, the pursuit of truth, the truth about who killed Pat and why, has been national and international news as well. A few weeks before Pat's killing, the scene was not only set for it, but the direct involvement in the killing by the British government was also set, both unintentionally revealed in comments by Douglas Hogg, a junior minister in the Tory government. He told the British House of Commons that certain solicitors were, quote, unduly sympathetic to the IRA. John told me that his parents spoke about their concerns arising from Hogg's remarks, but they didn't have time to do anything about it because Pat was killed just a few short weeks later. Douglas Hogg was briefed by the most senior levels of the RUC in advance of his statement in the Commons, a statement which paved the way for murder. Since Hogg's comments, the family have carried out with the British Supreme Court in praise of the family described as a relentless campaign in pursuit of a public independent inquiry into Pat's killing. This sustained pressure from the family has resulted in investigations into collusion in Pat's killing by Judge Peter Corrie, Lord John Stevens, the former head of the Met Police, and the barrister Sir Desmond de Silva QC. In 2004, Judge Peter Corrie, who was appointed by the Irish and British governments to investigate Pat's killing, confirmed collusion in the killing and called on the British government to hold a public inquiry. In 2007, Lord Stevens, appointed by the British government, said, quote, there was collusion in the killing and that the killing, quote, could have been avoided. In December 2012, responding to the De Silva investigation into the killing, the then British Prime Minister David Cameron said there were, quote, shocking levels of collusion. In February 2019, the British Supreme Court unanimously agreed with the Finucane family that the British government had failed to uphold Article 2, the right to life, in regard to Pat's killing. And a few weeks ago, in a court in Belfast, Judge McAlinden heavily censured the British government for, quote, adding insult to injury for the Finucane family in its failure to hold an inquiry. In addition to these irrefutable examples of state collusion in the killing of Pat Finucane, the British Prime Minister David Cameron met the Finucane family in Downing Street and said there was collusion and privately apologised to them for that. He also said there were, quote, people in these buildings don't want to give you this, a reference to his decision to have De Silva review the papers into the killing. The British Secretary of State, Owen Paterson, in the House of Commons a short time later, issued a public apology for the collusion. The investigations Cathaoirleach into the murder of Pat Finucane, perhaps more than any other killing, has undeniably proven the existence of the British government's policy of collusion. It has fixed the British government in the dock of world opinion for this policy, a policy which amounts to the British government and its agencies participating in the killing and injuring of its own citizens, to whom it had a duty of care as a government. Arising out of the Weston Park all-party agreement in 2011, it was agreed that 6 inquiries would be held into controversial killings. The only inquiry not carried out by the British government was that into Pat's killing. The family's campaign has received support from the Dáil, the US House of Representatives, Amnesty International and the British Labour Party, amongst many others. And just this weekend, 4 of the North's parties, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the Alliance and the Green Party, wrote a letter of support to the British Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, urging him to act in the public interest by holding a public inquiry. The family also received support from An Taoiseach at a meeting earlier this week. I'm finishing now, Cathaoirleach. So now is the time to add the voice of the Seanad to the widespread national and international support for the Finucane clan and their call for a full, public and independent inquiry into a killing that sent shockwaves across this country and beyond, and after 31 years leaves people in utter disbelief that the British government continues to block the truth about its murder through collusion of Pat Finucane and indeed many hundreds more in its secret dirty war in the north of Ireland. Cathaoirleach, Minister, colleagues, I commend the motion to the Seanad. Gordon Wygate.